All right, so a few weeks back, we watched the film High Tension, which comes from director Alex Aja. That was like sort of his breakout into the mainstream of the horror genre.
Yeah, I think it's his first movie.
It was, yeah, I believe so. And it kind of comes in the wave of films I really, really enjoy called the French Extremity movement, which were films that kind of started in like the late 80s all the way to like the mid 2000s and still going on. Kind of the French's own version of like extremely gory and prolific horror movies. And High Tension was like actually the first one I ever saw, but like there's films like Inside, there's films like Martyrs, you could even classify Irreversible and some of Gaspar Noé's work in that category to a certain extent, but High Tension, I really, really always liked that movie a lot. I think it's a really simplistic and very just kind of economic horror movie. It's very like well-paced, very, drawn out as perfectly as it should be. But yeah, I think Alex Aja has always been a really underrated filmmaker, especially in like the earlier part of his career when he had more to prove and like he was kind of doing much more grimy and like sadistic horror. But what did you think overall of High Tension?
Yeah, so High Tension from 2003, directed by Alexandre Aja, as they would say in France.
Yeah.
So I'm not super familiar with the French extremity movement. I want to get more into it, and this is kind of like my first entry into it. I saw The Hills Have Eyes like a while ago, and that movie's fucked up. Like kind of fucking, it's like super violent. And then he also directed Crawl from 2019, Quentin Tarantino's favorite movie from 2019.
That's right.
I'm not sure if it's the best movie from that year, but whatever.
Not really.
But I guess he's good at making these really like sort of compact, content horror movies that are fairly simple. High Tension is interesting because it's really kind of all takes place in real time, right? Like almost real time.
Yeah,
where it's
that's
like
true.
One thing leads to the next, and in this hour and a half movie, like an hour and a half in the movie is an hour and a half in like real time or whatever. Kind of mostly like that. I know like in the beginning it's like they skip into the whatever. Like the time, space, and memory aspect is like this takes place in like almost besides the beginning, it takes in like the end. I think it takes place all within like a certain like a couple hours or something, which I'm a really big fan of. I love that sort of like one thing leading to the next and you're kind of following this character. So the movie is about a friend who's going to go home or to visit her family, and she brings her friend with her who's like a lesbian that has a crush on her, or they're what's the story you want to
kind of what you were saying, like you kind of just these two girls are driving to their house, one of the girls' house in the country. The first like 20-30 minutes are kind of, you get the implication that the lead girl has a crush on her friend and she doesn't know about it, and kind of had this feminine gaze factor happen. And then very unexpectedly this
is a French movie, by the way.
It's French.
Yeah, this is a French horror movie.
It's a French language. I believe we watched it with American dubbing on, which isn't ideal, but it was okay. Eventually a man comes in a really disgusting dingy truck and basically starts wiping out her and her family. It kind of becomes this sort of cat and mouse thriller between the lead character and this guy. On the surface, it's very simplistic in that sense, but to me, like all these French extremity movies are usually from a feminine perspective, and they're usually sort of like allegories for, in the case of High Tension, kind of like sexual repression and like this kind of unwanted lust towards someone else. In the case of like her and her friend in the film, that kind of plays a part at the very beginning, but then in the third act when there's should we spoil the twist of this movie?
Yeah, well, let's get to it. Let's get to it. Like
I wasn't gonna spoil it yet, but I was just gonna say like it plays into that sort of psychologically damaged part of our lead character, and I think that's really interesting because like the movie on its head could be a very just standard issue slasher, and then it becomes a very like psychological kind of manipulation thriller, which I find really appealing. And the main aspect of why I really love that movie is that fact, but also like I love the locations of this film. I think it's like, it just really gets under my skin, is like this alien, like isolated farmhouse in the middle of nowhere. And it kind of just feels like this really just country Hickville sort of like nightmare story.
Yeah.
And I really love that. Yeah, in France, which you wouldn't expect. You'd feel like it's Texas Chainsaw, kind of like... And you could tell Alex Aja loves, like, Texas Chainsaw and, like, Tobe Hooper films and stuff like that, so...
That's definitely the obvious influence of this movie is Texas Chainsaw Massacre. It's literally, like, it's like Texas Chainsaw has influenced like fucking everything.
Everything.
Like yeah, this sort of hillbilly French countryside. It also has like a Jeepers Creepers type vibe to it.
Right.
Compared to like this guy who's like driving a truck around and like killing people.
Mm-hmm.
He's just not a cannibal. Is he just like a psychopath or what? Like
pretty much. I mean, I guess he's kind of like a Hannibal Lecter type in a way. He's like collecting heads, and these women are kind of like his wives in a way, like where he's like talking to the girl like, we're gonna go to dinner and like have a great night, you know, like they're kind of like his surrogate girlfriends before he murders them. Yeah, it's like that lonely hick sort of, even like with the Wrong Turn films, I don't know if you've seen those, but it kind of gives off that vibe of like isolated hicks from the South kind of going insane. So,
and the way this is shot, like what I love about foreign horror movies, especially European ones, is that they're shot so cool. Like they're shot so gritty. Like this has like a really gritty looking like film stock. I don't know what they shot on, but it's like definitely a very gritty style compared to like more glossier horror. Like Hollywood movies or Hollywood horror movies are very like more glossy. Even like Jeepers Creepers, which I think came out like even a year or two before, had this sort of like MGM gloss. I like to use like that term MGM gloss because it has like these sort of like smooth like camera shots, and it just looks more like, I don't know, it looks more commercial. This movie is like,
definitely agree.
Definitely like has that gritty Texas Chainsaw indie feel, which really lends to the whole aesthetic of the picture. This whole cat and mouse thing that goes down is like, for the most part, it's like most of the movie is the chase between this girl that gets kidnapped. Her love interest gets kidnapped by this guy, and she has to like chase him / run away from him at the same time. And that's like the first 2/3 of the movie. But then we get this like crazy twist.
Yeah, should we spoil it now?
Yeah, we can spoil it. And so this crazy ass twist, which made it even more. A lot of people, this twist like really pissed people off when I read about it, really critics and stuff.
It broke a lot of people's opinion on the movie.
Yeah, but for me, it actually made it way more interesting than just like what was happening in the. It actually like really like, I was like, oh fuck, like they're really going for it, and it definitely works for me, even if it doesn't make any fucking sense at all. Like what the fuck?
Logically, it doesn't, but to me. So basically, you kind of find out it was the lead character who was doing this all along. Yeah,
the twist is that the psychopath is actually just the split personality of the main character who's chasing this girl down and murdered her whole family. Yeah. And we find that out like 2/3 near the end of the movie, that she's actually
very close to the end. I would say within 20 minutes.
Yeah.
To me though, I think there is intentionality behind that, because it's like it's also inferred like she's come from a very like repressive, conservative upbringing or whatever before that, because she's really trying to bury her feelings, and it kind of feels like that guy that part of her brain, that psychopathic guy who comes to kill everyone, is kind of like this part of her brain that just wants to wipe out all of that feeling towards like this girl just completely away, because she's dealt with this repression for so long. It's kind of made her develop a part of herself that just wants to just destroy it all. I find that part really interesting. So like, and I know it's like narratively it's not handled super well, because it just kind of comes out of nowhere with no real explanation. So I've had to do a lot of, I've seen the movie a few times, and it's a lot of interpretation. So it's a little shaky. It's risk taking, to say the least, though.
Yeah. I think it works. It worked for me because it actually made me more engaged with the story. It kind of is. I wouldn't say it's necessarily like basic the first 2/3, but it is kind of like, it's really straightforward and stuff. But then when the twist comes out, you're like, oh shit, they actually really went for it. And then I actually became more engaged with what was going on. And also when they do these sort of like cross-cutting techniques of they switch from like showing the actual murderer to showing her, and you're like, wait, when is she actually psychotic and when is she actually like herself? Because I guess it kind of like, she cuts in and out of her like consciousness, I guess, cuts in and out of being a psychopath and then also just being herself. And I guess it's you got to take some leaps of faith of what the fuck is going on, but definitely interesting to say the least.
I think it kind of fits in the mold. Like a lot of movies, not necessarily horror or slasher movies, but a lot of movies in the early 2000s, like post, I guess, Fight Club and stuff, were kind of playing with that dual personality.
Yeah, it's like a trend.
Yeah, like Identity was a film directed by James Mangold that had a very similar twist.
I heard about that.
Which is A very interesting film. But like I feel like that was a trend. I don't know if it stems from or Fight Club necessarily, but
No, I think it does because
I think so.
Well, actually, there was a Primal Fear.
Primal Fears, yeah,
which I guess was before Fight Club. I don't know. That movie was like okay.
Never saw it. I know that's another Edward Norton
movie. So you don't really know. Okay,
I know the twist actually. It's been spoiled by all the Watch Mojos of the world back in the day. So.
Yeah, my dad's a big fan of Primal Fear for some reason. He's like, "Oh, Primal Fear is so good." It was kind of basic, to be honest.
It looks like a very like whitewashed version of like other movies.
Yeah, this whole like twist, like, oh shit, like the killer is actually the main guy.
It's like The Usual Suspects is another one like that too.
Yeah,
where it was like.
But I will say in High Tension, it does like it surprised me because I did not think that was gonna happen at all. Dude. Like I was
waiting for your reaction.
Initially, when this film was released back in 2003, the critical reception was mixed to poor from established critics, but I think the horror fans fucked with it. Roger Ebert gave it a 1 out of 4 and said it was like I guess he didn't fuck with the gruesomeness of it, and then also the plot twist. He thought it was a really big plot hole, and some other critics said stuff about the twist, even though I fuck with the twist. But I think horror fans fuck with this movie, right?
I would say so overall. I mean, I have other friends that were horror nuts like myself and you that definitely appreciate. They don't maybe love it as much as I do, but like they appreciate the intentionality and just kind of the risk taking elements of this movie, for sure. Because like I don't think if you boil it down, like it doesn't fully work as a full like packaged film. There's definitely elements that are a little wishy-washy, especially in the third act, even though I feel like I appreciate the twist more than I like it. Like I was saying about like French extremity movies, like they always take risks, like narrative risks, and like even just content wise, like pushing the boundaries of like what's acceptable on screen, like with Gaspar Noé and Juliette Ducournau. And like if you watch the film Inside, which is like a pregnancy horror movie, it's really fucked up, but it's like beautiful at the same time. So I highly recommend people check that out. But like High Tension is a great, like if you're trying to get into French extremity, High Tension is a great entry point because like you said, it's like a really simple narrative for the most part. Yeah. And Alex Aja is definitely like, he kind of transferred to like more mainstream stuff, like you said, with Crawl, and he directed that movie Horns with Daniel Radcliffe. Which was like I liked that movie in high school actually quite a bit. Yeah, he definitely moved to more like mainstream, mid budget horror stuff in America, and Hills Have Eyes, obviously. So
yeah, you can see how they would have hired him to do Hills Have Eyes because it makes sense, like someone who would take the reins on a movie like that. And if you watch High Tension, you would want to choose that guy to make Hills Have Eyes because it's a tall order, like I said, to like just do that Wes Craven classic remake. Yes. And I think he does it well, except it's just like to a higher degree of like violence and shit, because that movie's like really fucked up.
That's his thing. I think he's really a master of building tension, especially like really elongated sequences of like anticipation, like especially in High Tension, because there's a lot of her like kind of hiding in closets and sort of like enclosed spaces as this guy's hunting her down. Oh, yeah, and also one thing I want to mention is that European horror directors will kill children, whereas, like, American directors, like, they don't kill children. Not usually.
No, like, rarely. But in this movie, there's, like, a kid that gets killed, which is, like...
pretty gruesome.
Yeah, that's just, like, the risk that the Europeans take compared to the American. Like, there's too much taboo around certain rules in America, I think, that the Europeans, they don't give a fuck about, And also this movie, there's this book called High Intensity from 1996 or something like that, and the writer was going to sue the movie, but he decided against it because he thought that the movie wasn't a good representation of what like he was trying to say because of how gruesome it was, and he didn't want to be associated with it. But he said that he was like, yeah, like I'm not, this movie's like sucks, like I'm not gonna, even though like if you read the plot points of the book on Wikipedia, it's like very similar, but the real comparison of it is that High Intensity, the book, is there's no breaks in time with it. It's just moves from one sequence to the next, like all in real time to create tension, and which is like what High Tension does from 2003. So there's like that comparison. I kind of want to read the book now actually because it sounds pretty interesting, and I kind of like that time and space type shit that they do in movies. Like something like Good Time is very much very much in real time, the sort of Bressonian, like one thing to the next, following one character, Totally. And, yeah, that's all I really have to say. I
think it's a really solid movie, even. Like, again, like, it's a great entry point to that subgenre of film, but also just like if you like cat and mouse sort of really simplistic horror movies like I do, like that's definitely one to check out.
Yeah, it's definitely very much Texas Chainsaw. If you like Texas Chainsaw, you'll probably like this. Even though Texas Chainsaw, there's no like crazy twist. It's just kind of like her finding her way out in this one. Like when I was watching High Tension, I thought it was going to be like she was going to have to fight her way out. And it was going to be like more of a simplistic, like cathartic, like bloodbath type shit. But there's the twist and which makes it different than Texas Chainsaw in that regard.
I would say like the first like 2/3 are Texas Chainsaw adjacent, then it becomes more like, I don't know, like Psycho or something. Like it's like much more psychologically like minded kind of twist. So, but we got to do an episode on Texas Chainsaw maybe one day. I feel like we'd have a lot to say because that's kind of like the alpha and omega of like all horror to me. So
big fan. Big fan.
Huge fan. So
like everything influenced that shit, honestly.
Absolutely.
Yep. High Tension, 2003. The tension is high.
It lives up to the name.
Yeah.